reels, and then on YouTube he has also podcasts. So please, he's sharing his experience as he's learning, which I really, really love. It's one of a kind. So thank you, and thank you for making time for to do this today.
No, not a
Cool.
problem. Not a problem.
Awesome, awesome. So do you want to start? I know it was your topic, so you decided to talk about Saturn return.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that many people are frightened by it. Oh my God, what is this? What is happening? So after Mercury retrograde, I think Saturn return is one of the second thing that it's mainstream now. Like everybody knows.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us more about how do you feel it? What's happening? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting because even before I knew what a Saturn return was, obviously there's a lot of stuff in the zeitgeist, I think, that I've noticed around turning 30. There's a lot of, in recent years, I can think of a few examples. I'm sure there's probably loads. There was a film that came out a few years ago called The Worst Person in the World, which I really liked it. I would recommend watching that because that's about a woman in Norway who turns 30. And there's a lot of these themes that keep coming up around responsibility and, making...
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, we have to. After I save the live, please put it in a comment so people can watch it. I think it's a great idea. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to learn as well. If you can find... I love it when... I'm following astrologers and they mention a transit or, say like a planet's ingressing, like Saturn in Pisces, for example, and they're like, oh, this reminds me of this film or this film. And I'm like writing notes and wanting to go and check it out. And another thing was, do you know Bo Burnham, the comedian? So he released something called Inside. This was a couple of years ago that was... about his experience of like being in lockdown and trying to create a show.
Okay.
Amazing. But there's a song in it called Turning 30 and it's about him turning 30. And I just feel like, again, you have these themes of like having to let go of something, there's a line in it where he says like, oh, my stupid friends are having stupid children. And, he's like this feeling of like, oh God, what am I doing? Almost like, and I feel like this is a very Saturn return theme, is like, what am I doing with my life? What do I want my life to look like? And then the other big example that I think I mentioned this in my podcast as well is I recently went back and watched, there's an episode of Friends called The One Where They All Turn 30.
Yes, I know.
And I feel like the reason I'm mentioning these as to start off with is because even with the Saturn return aside, there is something in our culture around like what it means to turn 30, because I feel like when you turn 18 or 21, there's this sense of like, okay, I've gone from being a child or a teenager to becoming an adult. But when you turn 30, it's like, okay, you've had a good crack at being an adult now. You've had your time.
I hear you. Yeah. I just want to mention this. When I was astrology was always part of my life, but I didn't do transits or predictions. I was just, I just knew about science in my 20s. Anyway, so my dad used to tell me, there's a crisis when you turn 30. He called it a crisis, right? So it was, and then later when I found out, I said, oh yeah, because he had a Saturn return. He had me for his Saturn return. Yeah. So of course he had a crisis. He had a new responsibility. He had his kid, right? So he always addressed to something, oh, you're going to be much better when you pass this. This is a crisis of 30s. Anyway, I'm just, people notice that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is worth mentioning. So DMK in the comments said about what about turning 60? So we'll get to that in a second, because I suppose maybe for me, I suppose that because I have just recently turned 30, I'd been noticing that more. And I feel like although there is less in the media about that sort of age of like turning 60, there are still a lot of similar themes that come up. I mean, I used to work in a hospital with, it was in like the major trauma unit. So it was like with people who were having like car accidents or falling off ladders or all kinds of things. And I always noticed that the people who were around 58-ish, you know, 57, 58, were in a real, you know, it was like suddenly they'd had this accident, and then they were like, because I think at that age, often people take on extra responsibilities for their parents. You know, they've got aging parents, and their kids might be at a certain age where they might be either leaving home or they're going through a difficult teenage patch. Or I mean, these are generalizations, but I feel like
no, but they can also become grandparents. It's one of the
oh yeah, of course, yeah, definitely. And I think it's like, again, it's like repeating that thing of, okay, you know, what's your life? What does your life look like? What do you want it to look like? You know, what do you have to let go of in order to grow and to move forward? So
people also go to retirement as well. Some of them, some early retirements, you know. So it's like it's another change. It's like a big change in your life. It is changing your structure of your life. That's how I would say it.
Yeah, definitely.
In Saturnian way.
yeah. But that's a really good point, DMK, and I do think it's worth mentioning. I suppose a lot of people, I think there's a lot less said about the second Saturn return.
It's a little bit easier because you already been there. So why the first time is the hardest? Because you've never done it before. So it's the first time, right? See, DMK is planning for retirement. There you go. See, it's just coming. The themes are coming. So just to mention for those who don't know, Saturn return, we talk about when the Saturn comes to the same place, opposition, when it was when you were born. It takes around 29.5 years to go around the sun and go back to the same place. That's why we call it the Saturn return.
Yes.
So you kind of, so you kind of experiencing that energy when you were born with. And you didn't have actually, because the outer planets, when they move, they make all these aspects to other planets, and then you learn about your energies. And then after the Saturn return is kind of like a cycle, the big cycle, then you kind of start over, so you know the energy. I think that's why the 60s is a little bit easier. But, you know.
Yeah, and I think that for me, I think when you have a return, so just to speak, I think we'll break down the terms. So let's start with returns, which is, you know, you can have returns for most of your planets. So, you know, when you have your solar return, that's your birthday. You know, the sun returns to the same place that it did when you were born. You'll have a lunar return every month. You'll have your Mercury return once a year. You know, those kind of, and the way I see it.
But those are short.
Those are short. Yeah. Whereas when you move out to, say, like your Jupiter return, that's once every 12 years. Your Saturn return is around once every 30 years, 29 years. And I think actually I've just noticed that Soulforge has just joined, and he actually pointed out on my podcast that you have your Uranus return as well, but that's around
84. Around 84.
Yeah, 84 years. So whereas for Neptune and Pluto, they're a bit too, that would be a, you know, I think for Pluto it's like 200 years or something.
We still don't live that long, but you never know.
Maybe one
I'm just saying.
Maybe one day we'll have Neptune returns to talk about in astrology.
Many people in the past didn't even have the second Saturn returns because they used to die whenever 40. You know, like 300-400 years ago, right? So
true. And so I think for me, when I think about returns, I almost see it as though it's kind of like looking in a mirror. So it's like suddenly you're presented with the energy. And yes, sorry, DMK just said, is there a Venus return? So yes, you have a Venus return. That's like once every year.
Year and a half.
Year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
And something like that.
Mars return is about once every 2 years.
Yeah.
And the way I see it is, it's like the energy around you is matching with the energy within you. And so it's kind of like you see reflected in the world around you what is within you. And that's a really good moment to be like, oh, I feel like like you said before, get a better understanding of who I am through what is reflected around me. And for your solar return and for, you know, all the other planets we mentioned, a lot of the times you get often opportunities to experience that. But with Saturn, because Saturn moves so slowly, it's only a couple of times in your life, you know. And if you're lucky, you know, if you get to like 90, then you might have 3.
And the effects last longer, right? So it's not just a couple of days, couple of weeks that you feel it. You feel the energy months and months.
Yes. And actually, I think I remember when someone told this to me at one point. They said that yeah, your Saturn return, obviously when it's actually conjunct your natal Saturn, that is obviously a big moment, but you will feel the return for the entire time that Saturn is in the same sign. So usually for about 2.5 years.
Yes, yes. So especially it goes to in return. Yes, some people are lucky and they get their return without the retrograde, for example, then it's shorter. So, but if the Saturn goes retrograde at the time of your return, then it takes longer. So it depends. It's not the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have some questions, right? So the MP says right now Venus is in Leo in the same degree as my natal Venus in Leo. Is that a return? Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a return. And if the degrees when the Venus is going to go retrograde, it's going to hit it 3 times.
Yeah.
First direct, then retrograde, then direct again. So you're going to feel it more. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Because with the retrogrades, it means that you may end up having your return multiple times.
Yeah. I love how people love you, and I love how you talk. I'm hypnotized anyway.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry, just to say with DMK as well. I think so. One way that you can think about that energy of the return is to look at those Venusian themes. So thinking about, you know, what you like, what you don't like, the sort of things that you appreciate, what you find beautiful. And you might see that other people are expressing that energy in a way that feels like it resonates with you. And that might teach you something about yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like that. What are we going to say about Saturn return before? The second one. You were mentioning how the second one, nobody really talks about the second one, but how will you experience your first one? Is it over? Is it still ongoing? I wanted to share that with the public.
Okay, so let's talk about it, because I feel like I'm sort of reporting from the trenches here. You know, I'm in it. You know, I would say
you're the best person to tell us, right? Because you're feeling it right now.
Yeah.
You're feeling the energy, right?
Yeah.
So it's still ongoing.
It is. Yes, it's still ongoing. And actually, so Saturn is currently in Pisces. And my Saturn is at 0 degrees of Pisces. So earlier this year, when Saturn went into Pisces, because it is at literally the 1st degree, I felt it very intensely. It was like all of a sudden, like, whoa, oh my God, all of these themes were coming up. And I think it's worth mentioning just briefly. I mean, I'm sure that the people who are watching might already be aware, but Saturn is often associated with time, because of all the visible planets in the sky, it moves the slowest. So it was associated as like the timekeeper. It was the planet that saw the long plan, you know, that kind of could look, you know, into the future and think, okay, well, where are we going? You know, whereas maybe some of the other planets maybe a little bit quicker and a bit more, you know, Mercury it moves fast, but Saturn's like, okay, what's the long game here? Where are you going? And
it can delay things as well.
Yes.
So it gives you kind of like a, you know, you have to wait for your results. Yeah, but I find if you work hard with Saturn, if you don't take shortcuts, then you will get the results. But if you take shortcuts and you start, you know, I'm frustrated, then forget it. Then, you know, it's going to be just very hard. So
yeah,
embrace it.
Definitely. And it is hard work. And I think you're totally right that it's sort of saying, where do you need to work hard? And sometimes that will mean that you'll have to give things up. You know, it'll mean that you have to, there'll be restrictions that are put in place. And I just think that Saturn gets a bad rap, but I think when you're able to work with Saturn's energy, you know, you can accomplish, you know, amazing things. But I think it's asking you to almost choose a path and to be a bit more kind of what's the word I'm thinking? Focus
and discipline, you know, like not scattered all around.
Yeah, discipline is a good
for
word.
me as a I'm a big Gemini. I have like Sun and Moon and Mercury and midheaven in Gemini. When my Saturn return hit me, trust me, I wanted freedom and be all around, and so it depends also on your other placements. There's a question for you from Soulforge. Have you noticed the fruition of Pisces during this time of your life, Tom?
Yes. So so that was just a little bit about Saturn, as like, you know, what it means. And for me, so my Saturn return being in Pisces, so things that we can think about with Saturn in Pisces is that Pisces is it's like the big picture, you know, it's much more, I'd say, like almost ethereal and dreamy and like mysterious. And so when you bring Saturn into Pisces, I feel like there is that sense of restriction, but there's also a sense of like not quite being able to see where you're going almost. You know,
Yes.
when Saturn's in, like, so Saturn spent the last couple of years in Saturn ruled signs, so Capricorn and Aquarius, and that's maybe a little bit more like, yeah, making a plan. Whereas I feel like there's a spiritual quality to Pisces, which kind of means like you're going to be restricted, and and this is what I've experienced so far, is you're going to be restricted and you're going to experience losses, but you have to trust that there will be kind of a long-term gain in that.
Would you say you have to keep the faith, although everything says there's nothing to have faith about?
Yeah, and I think one way you could look at it with Saturn in Pisces is that it's maybe challenging your faith as well.
Yeah.
It's maybe calling into question what your faith is, you know, or maybe how much faith you have in something. Because, so for me, just to get into the specifics, what happened for me is that, so I have Saturn in Pisces in my 10th house. The 10th house is often associated with career and public image. Now, I had been on a path of, you know, being in the field of psychology, you know, and things like that for like the best part of a decade, like, you know, in terms of learning and being in that field. And I just kind of, well, what had happened was I'd applied for a course to become a doctor in psychology.
Okay.
And it's something that I'd applied to before and hadn't got on. And this time I'd honestly put blood, sweat and tears into it. But then I was rejected again, you know, outright, you know, didn't even get an interview. But I think what was helpful about that is that, again, it called into question of like, is this actually something that I want to do? Because I was having doubts, and I think that's a very Saturn retrograde, Saturn return theme, is doubting either yourself or the situation that you're in. And
oh my God,
those doubts.
You opened my eyes. You actually opened my eyes right now with this. I now look at Saturn return so differently. Wow. Okay.
So yeah.
Go on, please. I'll share my story later. That's really.
I was experiencing a lot of doubt of like, is this something that I want to do? Is this, you know? And really, when I sat down and thought about it, and was a little bit more kind of like, you know, what do I really want to do? And I think that's what Saturn is kind of asking you, you know, what's the long game? You know, where are you going? And I think what it made me realize was that this more spiritual aspect of my life and astrology was something that was really important to me, and that was something that I would like to pursue. And I feel like as soon as I started to think about that, it was like before doors were being closed to me, the path that I was on, it was, you know, again, in a very Saturn way of restriction, and, you know, it was like things were being closed to me. And then suddenly, like, making this change, I feel like now doors have been opening up to me more, you know, and it feels like there's a sense of being on the right track. Yeah.
Yeah, I that's really good. You open up my eyes completely. I mean, there's so many questions I can't even follow. People are so involved. I love it. How do you feel different in Saturn return? Do you manifest more? Well, I don't know. What would you say? I think it's not about manifestation. It's about work without actually having a result.
Yeah, I think what I would say is like being able to work with it. I suppose thinking about manifestation is like, you know, for me, what had happened is that I'd had that realization, and I was able to address it and sit down and be like, okay, I really need to think about this. This is really important to me. But I feel like you would be in a much worse position if you were like, this doesn't feel right. Because, by the way, and I want to make this clear, earlier this year, it was a very stressful, anxiety-provoking time. You know, I make it sound like I just was like, oh, you know, I'm going to change
No,
career,
no,
but
no,
it was
no, 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 no,
a
no. It's
real
hard.
moment of, a dark night of the soul kind of moment. And I think that, but what happens is if you are able to sit down and really think about it and think about, okay, what do I really want? And think about those Saturn topics of, in 10, 20, 30 years time, where do I want to be? What fulfills me? What, and what work can I put in to get there?
Do you feel, do you feel that astrology, knowing some astrology help you?
Oh,
Is it
massively.
helping you?
Massively.
Okay.
I think if I didn't know about all of this from an astrological point of view, and I think a lot of people have this when they get into their 30s, it's like, or when they turn 30, they're just like, have all these feelings come up, and all these feelings of like, oh my God, what am I doing? And like, and suddenly these questions of like, is this the career that I want? Do I actually want to have children? Do I want to, what responsibilities do I want to take on? I think when you are aware of like maybe why that might be happening astrologically, it gives you a clearer sense of it, and an understanding of, oh, okay, this is something that we all go through, and this is particularly the area of my life that it's highlighting when if you know your birth time and your birth chart.
I like what sorry from Sharon Brooks said. It's got you more on your purpose.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, and I'm so thankful.
Wow.
I look back at the time when like I said, it's a zero as Pisces. So in March, when Saturn moved into Pisces, it was like all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And so to go back to that question of manifesting, I think it was just the case that if you sit down and work with it, then you'll reap the benefits. Whereas I think for some people, they maybe have this experience, but then try to not think about it or avoid it and be like, actually, it's too scary. I don't want to think about it.
When I was going through it, I felt frustrated. It's the frustration of I'm doing the work, I'm doing everything. Why is this happening to me? Why do I like you, for example, you put your sweat and tears and blood into something, and you didn't get an interview. It's like a feeling of, what am I even doing? Why am I putting all this energy and effort into something? There's no results. You feel, it's also about self-worth at the end, and self-confidence. It's hitting all of that stuff, right? So it's, but I have to give something always encouraging.
Yeah.
As a ninth house stellium, I'm going to say something. What I heard just last weekend, Lynn Bell said at the conference, when you experience any type of loss, there is a hidden gift in it. So think about when you're going through a Saturn return, you lost this position, this dream of being a psychologist, doctor, whatever. But what is actually a hidden gift that you got? Think about that. That's what I think it's beautiful, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so my Saturn story. So I have Saturn conjunct Mars in Leo in the 11th house. They're tied together under 1 degree Earth. So you can imagine. So you can imagine Mars wanting to do things, action, and Saturn always tells me no, no, no. So my Saturn story, I don't want to take your time, but I just want to tell people, my knowledge of astrology at that time was just based on psychology and science and looking at natal charts, but I didn't do any predictions. I didn't understand the cycles and everything back then. It was more than 15 years ago. Anyway, so I experienced major things, a divorce from my first husband, and I had a business with my best friend from high school, and we split up. And everything happened at the same time. So it was about friendships. So it's 11th house. And now that I heard you saying, because my husband, my first husband, was also my friend, so so I considered losing 2 best friends. And now that you say the doubt, maybe, but I was doubting if this is really good marriage, and is this really a good friendship? Maybe, subconsciously, maybe I was really rethinking. Now that you just mentioned, I'm thinking maybe, I'm saying maybe there was an inner doubt. Am I going the right way? Is this the marriage for me? Is this the friendship in business for me? Now that you mention it, I'm gonna reflect on it.
Yeah.
I really opened up my mind, to be honest. Maybe I was really doubting it, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And doubt could
Looking
be a
hard.
good thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's been hard. I took therapy. I was under therapy and stuff. So I didn't have astrology at that sense at that time. So it really, and I had Pluto transits as well. So it wasn't just Saturn. So,
Yeah.
but look at me now. I'm saying, look, you survive. You go,
Mm,
and now I live a beautiful life now.
mm,
Different country, different husband. I have a kid. You know,
mm.
I practice astrology. I really, really feel fulfilled now that if I stayed there in that place with those people, I wouldn't be able to be here. I'm 100% sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you could have fought against that, you know, if Saturn brings in the doubt, but you, in terms of acting on it, you could have been like, I'm not sure about this, but I'm not going to say anything. I mean, that might have been difficult with Mars in the picture, but, you know,
Yeah.
I think that,
But
yeah.
Mars in Leo usually fights for the things that he wants, but I kind of gave up, to be honest. So something was telling me now that I reflect on it. I said, okay, I don't need anything. I just want to get this done and over with, and I want to start my life over. So it wasn't even, I wasn't clinging on it. So I think that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Not clinging on the past, on things that, you have to let go sometimes, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Just as a bit of advice, and I'm saying this as I'm very early into my Saturn return. I feel like I've experienced a lot of it, but we're in a retrograde now, and it's going to go.
You're in the center of it.
I'm in the middle of it.
You're in the spiral right now, like this.
Yeah. So I think in terms of advice, you know, I think, like you said, just not holding on too tightly to things. I think being open to other possibilities, because I feel like a lot of what I hear, like I said, that, you know, the films and the programs that I mentioned before about turning 30, or even just thinking about stories I've heard of Saturn returns, it's often like, if you try and hold on too tight to things, it's just going to cause you more suffering. There's almost like a sense of like being able to let go and let things fall away, and then decide, okay, now that I've lost a lot, where, you know, I can start building again.
Yes, that's exactly what and then Saturn will help you to build again. He will give you the discipline and focus, and you will be able to do it. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's a good. And I wanted to mention, because we were talking about the second Saturn return. So because my dad had me for his first Saturn return, and I had all this divorce for my first Saturn return, I came back home to my dad. So for his second return, he had his daughter going through all these problems and coming back home, responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, this is also what can happen.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be.
Dad has Saturn in Pisces, so he is also going through his second Saturn return as well. Yeah.
So it can be somebody, if you had it for, exactly. See, so the same situation, your kid is going through something, and then you have kind of a responsibility to your kid to help them or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm just aware, by the way, I was just looking back through the comments, and Senny Flew, I don't know if they're still here, but they said, can you repeat this again? Was there anything that you missed that you'd like us to repeat?
I will save. So for everybody who's watching this or can watch to the end, I'm going to save the video, and I'm going to put Tom, invite him as a collaborator, so he can have on his feed as well. And you can always rewatch and listen again if you missed anything. Because Tom is also Gemini, I feel, right?
Yeah.
You're also Gemini?
Yeah.
So if two Geminis talk a lot, when two Geminis talk, you guys can miss something. We apologize.
Yeah.
But I wanted to mention something that I noticed, that for your birthday, you got little kittens, right? So I thought that was a very beautiful new responsibility for your Saturn return. I thought it was very cute, especially in Pisces, which is about animals, small pets. I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, no, true. That is true. And also very Gemini, because they're two brothers, and because they're kittens, they're like twins. And well, another thing to mention, actually, and I think this is important to mention, that there wasn't just the sense, although I feel like there were other things happening in my chart at the time, but also whilst all of this was going on and I was having these like doubts about my career and thinking about what I wanted to do, we also lost a cat. So we'd had a cat from late last year. It was my first ever pet. And yeah, after 4 months, we lost him in, I think like late March. So again, there was that, I think, again, that sense of loss. Loss is a really, really key term, I think, especially for Saturn in Pisces, because it's like, and also actually just before, so earlier on in the year, back in January, I'd lost my auntie as well. And so there were these themes of, that's okay, thank you. And I feel like there's these themes of like, and I feel like what Saturn is kind of trying to say is like, and I know this sounds almost quite morbid, but I suppose it is in a way. It's like Saturn saying nothing lasts forever, you know, and things are impermanent. So what do you want to do with the time that you have? You know, and I think that that's the thing, you know, when we have our Saturn return, and the anxiety that comes up is often because it's like, oh, I'm suddenly realizing that I don't have all the time in the world, and I'm going to have to choose a path. And that might be, you know, whether you're in a career that doesn't quite align with you, or you're in a relationship that doesn't align with you. And it's suddenly like, okay, knowing now, the Saturn return is reminding me, you only have a certain amount of time. What do you want to do with that time?
I feel as well, this is greatly, you made a great point. I just feel that in our 20s, we are full enthusiastic. We have these dreams and hopes and you know, and then you want, oh, I'm going to accomplish this, and you have this, you know, it's, the world is, you know, I have all the time in the world. When you hit 30, you're like, oh my God, nothing happened that I thought 10 years ago will happen. Like, what is, you know, that's right. What is happening? What, you know, I think that's a shock. That's where anxiety comes in. Oh my God, I lost the time. Oh my God, I should have, look at this guy and this guy. And then you compare to others. Oh, they have this and I should have, you know, that's also a problem, you know, that gives you more anxiety. Yeah.
And you just reminded me actually, this kind of fits in. So Soulforge had just mentioned about value what you hold dear, for tomorrow will fade. Fantastic, you know, Saturn return quote. And another one, and this was actually, a friend said this to me, and I feel like this is a really good takeaway. You know, if you want any tagline for Saturn return, I think this is a good one. She said to me, she was like, because she's a few years older than me, I think she's about 35 now, and a few years ago we were talking about her experience of being in her 30s and what that was like. And she said to me, she said, in your 20s, you spend all your time waiting for life to begin. But in your 30s, you realize that this is just it. This is life, you know? It's not that you can't wait for something to happen, because it already is happening right now.
I don't know if it's sad or happy, if it's funny or sad at this point. Yeah. I don't know. But that's perfect. That's exactly what it is. That's I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, I felt the same. But I also have to tell you, to reassure you, when I hit 40, I felt better. I felt that I have more time than I thought when I was 20. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So to be honest, at 40, I felt like a teenager. Like what?
Yeah. Like
problem. Like you're the time and the motion of time just disappears. Like with the Saturn return is over, time doesn't matter anymore. That's what I find.
Okay. That's
so after, absolutely. Like it's nothing to do with time anymore. It's about other things then afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Right? That's good to know. Yeah, it definitely feels a bit like at the moment there is just that sense of like, oh my God, you know, I have such limited time. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to use my time? And there's a pressure there. But yeah. Oh, someone just posted a comment. So, so Soulforge says, as people who have experience with Saturn return, is there a way to prepare for it ahead of time? So yeah, what would you say, Jasmina?
Yeah. Well, I would say that you were prepared. Astrology helped you, so it is easier. So you're less frustrated. You still have to go through it, but if you embrace it, if you don't fight it, that would be my only advice. Just embrace it. It's something that will last for a little while, couple of years or whatever, how long it takes. It takes a couple of years because, you know, because the energy when it's applying, it can be a couple of months before. Like for you, it can start in January and then now it's going back. So it's going to be this whole year until maybe, you know, maybe one more year, right?
Yeah.
So summer next year, we're going to feel the fading away and, you know, going away and stuff like that. So it does take. especially have the retrograde longer. But
Mhm.
knowing that it's going to end, it has to comfort you in some way.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. And then just embrace it. Okay, I won't fight it. I won't, in a way that, why me? Why this? It happens to everybody. So that's,
Yeah.
you're not the only one.
Yeah.
If that comes.
I just wanted to, kind of agree with that, because I think Saturn, knowing about your Saturn in your birth chart and through astrology is so helpful, because it tells you the area in which you're going to experience those things and the kind of themes to keep an eye out for. But also, I suppose one thing I would say in terms of preparation, and kind of similar to what you just said, Jasmina, is like, you will experience loss, but it is for a greater good. All the stories I hear, like you just said, and what I've said, is like things that seemed very permanent before suddenly were just gone, and you're like, oh my God. And the thing is that if you don't have faith and you don't have that sense of like, a kind of that zooming out, which I think astrology is really good at, zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, then
Absolutely.
You'll think, oh my God, my life's over, what am I going to do? Whereas what Saturn return is doing is, I feel like it's almost like, knocking structures down to build something new. It's kind of like, right, get rid of that, you don't need that anymore, don't need that, right, new foundation.
You can, it also, it depends on which house it hits. So you focus on another area of your life. So for you, it's career.
Mm-hmm.
Don't force it. In a way, don't force changing jobs. Don't force doing anything career-wise. It will pass.
Yeah.
Just for me, like keeping the friendships alive that are no longer valuable, I had to let them go. I had to let people go, right? So my friends. So that's also depends in which house it hits you. So I would say, as a suggestion, focus on another house. Like focus on a hobby. Like astrology is a hobby for you for now, right?
Mm.
But I feel that you can be such a great astrologer and practitioner. I hope you will practice soon.
Thank you.
And help other people.
I think that's
because
a good point though, and maybe a bit of advice as well is like, it's going to be slow, because I think something about Saturn as well, if you look at it in your birth chart, where it falls, the house it falls in, will tell you an area of your life where things go slowly. They take their time, and that doesn't mean that it's never going to, come to fruition. It just means that it will come to fruition with hard work and with time and patience.
And with delay, with time, yes. So don't force it. Like, oh, I want it now. Look, for me, I have my Mars with my Saturn. It's always been, like, I wanted something active. So it also depends what aspect does it take. Is it an stellium? Is it, there's a bunch of other stuff to take in consideration, but this is just in general. Yeah, see, we want you, Tom, to keep studying astrology. I think I really truly believe that you're a wonderful astrologer.
Thank you.
Absolutely, I love the way you speak astrology and how you present what's happening. You're just being so vulnerable and sharing your story today. I think that's beautiful. I think that also helps people. This is how it helps. If we share our stories and tell people how this happened, how it manifested in our lives, you can help other people as well who are going through. And you help so many people, I believe, with this, who are going through this right now. Absolutely. So yeah, if anybody wants to talk to you, shoot you private DMs. You tell them. I don't want to.
Well, I am thinking that I'm going to start offering kind of free readings to people just to kind of get a bit of that experience, because in my time in psychology is the best way to learn is from just doing and experiencing it. And I think that even with all of the studying in the world, it's so different. You could know a lot about astrology, but like actually sitting and talking with someone and looking through their chart is such a different experience. So
you have to go through chart.
If anybody sees this and they are interested in having a free reading, then please reach out to me. I'd be happy to.
Wow, that's amazing! I'm gonna put it in the finish the video. That's amazing, Tom. Thank you. That's really, really good. Especially, you have many people who are going through this right now. I really feel, and you have a psychology background, so that's another layer that can help, because you have that sensitivity, to know other people's psyche, and I should have studied psychology. I don't know. I went to finance and business for no reason. Anyway, another story. I couldn't. Yeah, my Saturn. I couldn't get into what I wanted to study anyway. So when I was 21, and stuff like that. So it's a square opposition. My Saturn is really putting me to work. Anyway, each chart has its own beating heart, but it doesn't truly come alive outside of consultation. Absolutely. And I like to talk to people for consultations because it I hear feedback. How is it happening with them? And we can.
And this is the same, you know. And I think thankfully a lot of my experience in psychology has really prepared me, I think, for this, because, you know, in psychology we use lots of frameworks and lots of ideas, and sometimes I'll go into a session with people and I'll be like, okay, I think today we're going to talk about this, or, you know, I'm kind of going to maybe lead them, like, or kind of like opening up the conversation, but maybe having an idea of how the session is going to go. In the same way that I imagine, you know, you might go to read someone's chart and you think, oh yeah, I know what we're going to talk about because there's this, and this. And then when you speak to them, like, that is not sometimes what you end up speaking about, because they can surprise you. And it's about learning
because
as you go.
We don't want to judge. First of all, we don't want to assume. Assumption is awful. You know, assuming, oh, I saw a chart, I know who you are. That's the worst you can go, right? That, you know, the chart can go any way, right? It can speak many languages, right? So don't assume, I would say, always, and just ask. It's very important. So many nice people joined. Look at this guy on my just my coworker. Yeah.
Well, I guess. So before we go, because we're both Gemini, so we could easily go off on loads of tangents.
Yeah, we can go. Yeah.
Whilst we've got some people here, and since we're talking about the topic of Saturn returns, does anybody have any questions about Saturn or Saturn returns, or any any stories they'd like to share?
Yeah, for you who don't know astrology very much, when you were 29, 30, did you experience anything that was really hard that you want to share with us? Because that's also, excellent. I guess not. I'm going to save the video. If you have any comments or questions later, Tom and I are here for you. And Tom offered free consultations. I'm so excited for you. Look at me. I'm so happy. I don't know, if you know Frida from Esoteric Adventures. She's an astrologer. She's also a psychologist and an astrologer. I had a live with her about ethics in astrology. So she's also good. I like when psychologists actually use astrology to help clients. I think that's also very important. I think it's a good tool. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I've learned so much about that, like one-on-one connection with somebody, and the ethics of that. You know, because when we're doing a reading for somebody, you know, you're inviting them to talk about their personal lives. They are making themselves vulnerable in the process, and I think it's really important to honor that. Absolutely, that's number one thing for me as well. It's just, you know, we are all humans, we have all stories. We all went through all these cycles, and we have, you know, suffered in one way or the other, and have our own insecurities and many other stuff. So okay, I should just zip it. No, it's so tempting. Keep going.
I could talk to you for the rest of the day. It was such a pleasure and honor to talk to you. Oh my God, you opened up my eyes. Like, see, I want to tell everybody, it doesn't matter how long you practice astrology and in which phase of astrology learning you can always contribute with your own ideas and thoughts and experiences. And that's the beauty of astrology. Yeah, we all. So, I'm doing this for years. You know, even if you just started yesterday, you have something to contribute to astrology community and to everybody. I really, really think that. To astro nerds getting excited with each other, I love it. Yeah, Gemini nerds. This is even a special layer.
Yeah. Special type of nerd.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining, for being so interactive. I love it. I love those interactive lives. I will save this for later for all of you who couldn't watch it till the end. Tom, all the best to your Saturn return. If you need anything, let me know in any way.
Thank you.
We should do another live as well about something else that you would like to talk about.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah. No problem. It was my pleasure. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.